Casey at the Bat, an American Folktale. Now this is the story of a player who was the greatest of great. He stood head and shoulders above all other players, a giant, a tower of strength, and a true pillar of his team. Strong as an ox, endowed with a winning smile and the abilities of 10 lesser men, he was adored by many a fan, and he was none other than the mighty Casey of the famous Mudville 9. This mighty Casey popped more stitches on more baseballs than most batters even ever hit. Whenever he came to the plate, he'd always let the first two balls go by on purpose. Strike one, strike two. But when it would come time for strike three, Casey would tire toying with the pitcher's seat. Grim determination would set in. He would grind his teeth together, and his furious glare said he wanted to murder that ball. Then came the pitch, and Casey swung his bat with the power of a hurricane. When Casey's bat connected with the ball, hats flew off from the shock, and everyone ducked down low. Terrified birds flapped, and people's peanuts flew right out their bags. If the ball didn't simply explode into a small cloud of horsehide, it was found far outside the stadium. When it was found at all, that is. And it wasn't hard to prove which balls were from the mighty Casey's hits. They'd be completely flattened by the stroke of his mighty bat. Now, Casey was great, but his team was a whole nother story. Poor Flynn was always getting the bat tangled up in his oversized mustache. Now, the bat would spin in the wind, and confused Flynn would take off just like an aeroplane. And as for Jimmy Blake, well, his nickname was Cake, because he always crumbled on the plate. A favorite trick among the other players was to stick a match in Jimmy Blake's shoe while he was at the bat. Then they'd light it to wake him up. Now, Blake got his only hits when his shoe was afire. Mighty Casey was the hero of the team that fateful season when the Mudville 9 was tied for first place. Ah, yes, it was a proud team, a little shaky if it weren't for Casey, but a mighty proud team just the same. Proudest of all, of course, was Casey himself. It was the day of the great championship game, and I'll tell you the story as it was told to me. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville 9 that day. The score stood 4-2, but one more inning left to play. And then, when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of that game. A staggering few got up to go in deep despair. Now the rest clung to hope, which springs eternal in the human breast. They thought if only Casey could get a whack at that, we put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, as so did Jimmy Blake, and the former was a Lulu when the latter was a lake. So upon the stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance for Casey get to bat. But Flynn let drive a single to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off that ball. And when the dust had lifted and the men saw just what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn was hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley and it rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flats. For Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. When responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his hat. No stranger in the crowd could doubt now that Casey was at the bat. "10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye and a sneer curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching in a haughty gandered there. Close by the sturdy batsman, the ball unheeded sped. "That ain't my style," Casey said. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches black with people there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of the storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" shouted someone in the stand, and it's likely they'd have killed him if Casey not raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He smiled, stilled the rising tumult. He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the sphere flew, but Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud!" cried the maddened thousands, and the echo answered, "Fraud!" But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grown stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. And they knew that Casey wouldn't let the ball go by again. The sneer is gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched with hate. He pounds cruel violence, his bat upon the plate. And the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and the air is shattered by the force of the mighty Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there's no joy in Mudville, for mighty Casey has struck out. And that's the end of the story of Casey at the bat.